getting worse with every minute. Uh, just, just to Ehud Barak, whom you know, former Prime Minister of Israel, quote, "Neither military pressure nor flattening southern Lebanon can topple Hezbollah." End of quote. You're right, former Prime Minister. But Bibi's caught between a rock and a hard place. The one side being the hard place, if you will, being Trump, and the rock being those people who are campaigning against him are campaigning on the very issue that he's not tough enough on Israel's national security, and oh, by the way, bows to President Trump. So he can't win for losing, and I think he's going to lose. I think he's looking at his first dramatic loss in his long-lived political career. So it's become, as my students used to say, as much, if not more, a domestic issue for Israel and a political issue for Netanyahu, personal political issue for Netanyahu, as it is an issue of either the U.S. or Israel's, or for that matter, Iran's security. And in all of this, I was just on another podcast, and this came up, and so I belabored it for a while. All of this misses the real point in this entire struggle, in this particular aspect of it. The struggle is about a Palestinian state and about what Israel has done in the interim to the Palestinians. And I don't just refer to what started on October 7th or October the 8th, but the whole history of the Nakba and the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians, increasingly one of occupied and occupier, which has, as you know, a very distinct set of rules and regulations that goes along with it, which Israel is absolutely ignoring and has ignored for the entire time this situation has existed. So if we can't get to that issue, we don't seem to want to get to that issue. In fact, what's happening right now is the Palestinians are dying at the rate of about 30 to 35 a day still. And they're dying of all manner of reasons. They're dying from bullets and bombs and brutality, but they're also dying because Israel's got a humanitarian situation that it is supporting that is everything from mafia-like and costing the Palestinians $250 for a dozen eggs, for example, and making lots of people, including many Egyptians, rich in the process. And all this is just over there on the sidelines. We're looking at Hezbollah, we're looking at Daria, we're looking at Beirut, we're looking at what Israel's doing in Lebanon, which is unconscionable, of course. It always is when Israel does it, especially to Lebanon or the Palestinians. And we're being distracted from what is, I think, the real issue here, which is summed up in that Haaretz headline I used to like to quote: all Iran has to do to win is not lose. All the United States and Israel have to do, and this includes Bibi Netanyahu's future, I think, in jail or a hero, uh, win spectacularly. And we're not going to do that. We've already lost, really. In effect, we've already lost. No matter how much Bradley Cooper disputes it, no matter how many new reverse engineered drones he buys for attacking Iran with them, no matter how many bombs he calculates dropping, we've lost. There's another piece out in the Jerusalem Post which belabors the Mackinder theory, if you will, but nonetheless makes some points. It says Iran doesn't have one nuclear weapon, it has three. The first nuclear weapon it has is the Strait of Hormuz, and we've demonstrated conclusively we don't know how to handle that weapon. The second weapon it has is its relationship, Mackinder-like, with the heartland power, Russia and China on top of that. Talk about the heartland. And then the third nuclear weapon is the nuclear weapon it probably is making right now or is already made and could test at any moment, or that Pakistan may have given it, depending on whose version of the rumor you believe. So where are we in all of this? We're at the point where President Trump makes a statement that he never said he was the president who wouldn't start a war. Are you kidding me? I mean, your lies are many and replete with every issue you speak about, but this one, it's just baffling. And I don't think we have, at the same time, I got to mention the domestic situation here in this country. We're headed for disaster, I think, with regard to the midterms. and I have no idea what he's going to do for that disaster. At the same time that Tom Cotton in the Senate and others in the House, but principally Johnson, the Speaker, are working on gluing us to Israel in a way that the cement, once dry, will never break, and Israel will get most of the advantage of it. You can't make this stuff up. It's incredible what we're doing. And today, right before I went on with you, I said, I think I'll review my YouTube menu because I have this thing I've set up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going down all the interviews of the last 24 hours with people like yourself, Doug McGregor, John Mearsheimer, Peter, Jeffrey Sachs, a host of others that I have listed and look at. Not a single one on Ukraine. Not a single one on Ukraine. Not identifiable in the titles anyway. Maybe they mentioned it in the podcast, in the body of the podcast. So where's Ukraine right now? Where's it gone? It has gone nowhere. In fact, it's getting increasingly dangerous, and I wouldn't expect Putin to use a nuclear weapon tomorrow morning, but I might expect him to use one eventually if we keep on this path with these idiots in Europe. Brief summary.
Well, on the Ukraine issue, I very much agree. I get after this meeting now at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Putin yet again had this very low key, non-confrontational tone, but I get the impression he's more and more standing alone on this. I mean, his National Security Council is not with him. All the people around him appears to be arguing that enough is enough. The Europeans are openly expressing the intent of continuing to attack us. We know they're using the territory of NATO countries to attack us. We know it's their weapons. We know they're doing the targeting. It's why do we not do anything? Essentially, inaction is becoming much more dangerous than action the way they see it. But so I'm not sure how long Putin will hold this back. And I think for many in the West, this is something difficult to appreciate because they've been taught that Putin is evil himself, but he's essentially the one holding the Russian restraint, which is now becoming very damaging to Russia to the extent it's being abandoned soon. So, no, I think we're sleepwalking into a massive disaster. And I think I'm not sure you use the idiots in Europe, but that would be a very appropriate term, I guess, for the political leadership and their stenographers and the media. But
look at Stormer. I bet you couldn't walk out of a building in London or anywhere in England, maybe even in Great Britain. You could walk out of a building and say, "Are you for Keir Starmer?" and find someone who would say yes, and yet he's still the leader. And you could say similar things about Macron and as what's her Elizabeth Veto, I guess, AfD leader in Germany, as she gains more strength, and I'm very interested in where she is finally going to wind up. You wonder about Germany, the most significant country in Europe, in my view. And your wonderment is punctuated with what you just described very well. The fact that they don't seem to care. They don't seem to understand what they're setting up. They don't seem to understand, for example, that they could cause something to happen, like maybe Putin hits a target that is clearly associated, and I have no doubt his intelligence can tell him this easily, with attacks on Russia or support of attacks on Russia in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, you name the country really, and attack it directly. And then what's going to happen is they're going to meet in Brussels and beat their chests, and they're going to say, okay, Article 5. And the United States is going to look at him and say, kiss my ass. I'm not joining you in Article 5. I mean, after all, he hit something that was a danger to him, even if it was us he hit. It could well be us or us and the British and whoever else. Like you said, this is a Barbara Tuchman's terms. It's a march to folly. It's wooden-headedness, but it's entirely different in terms of the consequences and the circumstances, even looking back on the disaster World War I was and even more World War II. Still, this has nuclear consequences tied to it with a red ribbon and perfume sprayed on it. You can't discount that. And I like what you said about Putin because that's my appreciation of him too. He's holding back the water in the dam right now. It's not like people are saying in this country that he's got major opposition to what he's doing. They want the war over. Blah, blah. Yeah, maybe they want the war over, but they want it over on strictly Russian terms. And they're holding him back in terms of his prudence, his circumspection, and his willingness to do whatever he can short of going directly to war with NATO. Even though I think in his mind, sometimes he says things, and Sergei Lavrov says things that make me think they've had meetings and they've said, well, eventually we're going to have to go to war with NATO. And I've no doubt in my mind that the Russian general staff is beavering away with plans for that from one end to the other, probably starting in Kaliningrad. But this is a very dangerous situation, and we just don't seem to be cognizant of it. You look at our media here, Glenn, and you would think that Ukraine was a sideshow that one reports on maybe once a week or so and tells what a bastard Putin is, and that what's going on in Levant, although it has some huge ramifications because it looks like Trump's losing, but a lot of people in this country, I'd say probably 50 to 60% of people in this country who are sentient don't mind that. That's hard to say, but I really believe that. They're not very much in favor of this war. Certainly the youth aren't. The youth that have just registered their views with this new system we're putting in place for selective service and for conscription. And most of the polls and the results of the polls are pretty, I mean, even shocking to me that 18 to 24-year-olds not only say no, they say, yeah, I'll be Mexico or Canada. I'm not going in for this. And you can't hardly blame them under the circumstances. And you watch veterans come out, as I did this morning, and veterans, this particular individual is a veteran of Afghanistan a couple of times, in Iraq once, and he's saying, this is what we did. This is what we did for corporate America. This is what we did for Lockheed Martin. This is what we did for a president who didn't know what he was doing, for presidents, plural, that didn't know what they were doing. This is what we were doing for the war machine. This is what we're doing for the military industrial complex. We know that. And these 18 and 24-year-olds who are about to be drafted may not know that in a way that they can articulate it, but they damn sure aren't going to go to war for Donald Trump. So why are we even talking about this? And why are we looking at, as I'm told Admiral Bradley Cooper is, a reverse engineered Iranian drone that we think is going to be a game changer in Iran? Ain't nothing going to change the game in Iran. No drone, no anything like that. No accoutrement of war is going to change that, because this Mackinder theory, I think, is right. One nuclear weapon is the Strait of Hormuz. The second nuclear weapon is the relationship with Russia and China. And the third nuclear weapon is the one they're building or going to be given by Pakistan. So that's what you're up against, Donald. Maybe you know that because you seem of late to be looking for ways out solidly and carefully and constantly looking for ways out without tarnishing your reputation as being the greatest president that free world has ever seen. Nonetheless, I think he wants out. But they're caught. Bibi and he are caught. Bibi's caught in the political context that says to him from his opposition, who are likely to beat him if he falls back a second, they're saying you're not being hard enough in Lebanon. You're sacrificing Israeli security to Donald Trump. You're not doing what you should be doing in Gaza. You're not finishing them off. You're killing them, but you're not killing them at a fast enough rate, and you're not killing Hamas. And Trump's telling him to slow down, even not to do this, not to do that, especially bombing in Daria, the southern part of Beirut. So what does he do? He does the one, he probably loses the election and goes to jail and lives in ignominy for whatever portion of his life he has left. If he does the other, Barack says you're not going to accomplish anything. I think Barack's right. He's not. Hezbollah has advantage on him, I think, now. And this morning, one of the people I was talking with was saying they're proxies. The Houthis, the Hezbollah, the Hamas. They're proxies. And I said, they're not proxies, they're allies. They're allies just like we have allies. And they're not terrorists either. I can make you a good legal case under the international regime and even domestic. I can make you a good legal case for occupying power and occupier, occupying power and occupied, and make an excuse for Hamas. It's not really an excuse. They're freedom fighters in Ronald Reagan's view. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, I think he said. Um, and I can make the same case for Hezbollah, and I can make the same case for anyone fighting on Iran's side. They are allies of Iran, and they're allied ultimately, and this is a point we keep missing. This media in this country will not talk about it in a lucid, meaningful way. We're missing what MBS, for other reasons than benevolence, doesn't miss, and others like him, the Palestinians. This is all about the Palestinians and a viable state and a way to get to that state for them. It's been about that for so long. It all boils down to that, and Iran is now the premier defender of the Palestinians, and so are its allies like Hezbollah and the Houthis. Characterize the conflict properly so you can deal with it properly is a fundamental principle of Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, you name it. But we've refused to characterize this conflict properly, and therefore we make mistake after mistake after mistake. There's my lecture.
Well, since you mentioned, I think, so resolving the Palestinian issue, I think that is obviously at the core. And if Israel would do a fundamental shift in its foreign policy, that is, abandon this clean break strategy of simply dominating its neighborhood, I think it would have to.
Even Kagan has abandoned it, apparently.
I know. Well, I think at that point it does have to find a way of getting along with Iran, but to do this, it has to try to resolve the Palestinian issue, because I can understand to some extent why the Israelis have done what they've done the past 30 years. If you have the all-powerful global hegemon, the US standing behind it, telling it you don't really need to make any compromise, then why would you make any compromise? But when you see that the hegemon is in decline and you will be in a weaker position tomorrow than you are today, surely this is the time to strike the deal. But this is something.
They're shoring it up. They're shoring it up with Tom Cotton in the Senate and Johnson in the House, Section 224 of the 2027 NDAA, and gluing Israel and the United States in an embrace that can't be broken. So you're right, but these people are fighting a rearguard action that's going to disrupt this country majorly, I think.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask, because we see now the Iranians extending their deterrent to Lebanon, but I also saw today a report by the political spokesperson of Hamas, Hassan Qasem, who made the point that the Iranians contacted him and let them know that any ceasefire will now include Gaza as well. That is, Israel can no longer have a ceasefire with Iran and continue the slaughter in Gaza. So this is essentially, putting real pressure.
That's truly I was reading up on it last night as much as I could. That truly is a hideous situation still. There are so many people, a dozen eggs can cost as much as $200. A pint of fuel can cost $75, $80 US equivalents. It's because the Egyptians, the Israelis, yes, many Israelis, of course, are involved with it, particularly those running various aspects of the so-called, quote, humanitarian operation, unquote. They're making a fortune off this, a fortune off the plight of the Palestinians, just to drink a little clean water, just to have a little electricity, just to have some food. And the prices are just extraordinary, and the black market is extraordinary, and Israel's supporting it all. And as far as I can tell, there's a huge segment of Egypt that's supporting it too. It reminds me of what we had to do to get that woman out. Back up just a little bit. We had a family in Rafah that was the family that Rachel Corrie, whom you may recall, I certainly do, as chief of staff of the State Department, trying to get Israel to admit they'd murdered her. I knew they'd murdered her. I saw the evidence. They had murdered her. I saw the video of the bulldozer. But they never would fess up. They never would do an investigation that mattered to anybody. They wouldn't even answer Secretary Powell. They answered him with a pro forma answer. We did these investigations, etc. But we were trying to. This was the same family that Rachel was protecting that day when she was killed by the Israeli bulldozer. We were trying to get them now increased somewhat, and a woman with them that was pregnant out into Rafah. And the price of getting them out, with the Egyptians being the principal intermediaries, just kept climbing. By the time we got through, it was over 100 grand. You know, everyone is taking advantage of this now in a sordid sort of way to make money. And Israel is one of the biggest money makers in it and perpetrating the whole thing, really making it possible. So I applaud Iran. Good on you, Iran. Bring it back to the real issue.
But on that real issue, that is on yeah, restraining Israel a bit, we see that one of the things that had, well, it's restrained in many ways, is being balanced by the Iranians. They are also struggling in their fight with Hezbollah. They're not being successful against the Palestinians. But I think a key, possibly the most important issue where it's in decline would be its international standing, and most importantly in the United States, because this the US supplies the money and the weapons to do these things, and the intelligence for that matter. But now we see, as the support for Israel is declining, there's an effort now to essentially embed Israel legally within the U.S. military-industrial complex. And this is with this new Section 224. I was wondering if you can unpack what this actually means. I mean, what is it at stake with this?
It's very dangerous, I think. The first thing it does, and let me back up just a little bit and take it back to Donald Rumsfeld and Colin Powell. When Donald Rumsfeld made a similar